What happens when Drake, a global superstar known for calculated silence, finally decides not to let a moment slide and fires back live on daytime television, right in front of millions, at Sunny Hostin? What happens when polished smiles crack, studio lights feel too hot, and a single question turns into a cultural standoff that no one in the room saw coming? Before we go any further, subscribe to Live Narratives right now, like this video, and drop a comment telling us what you think is about to happen, because once this moment starts rolling, there is no rewinding it. The audience didn't know it yet, but the energy in the studio was already off. Not loud, not chaotic, just tight. The kind of tension that sits in the air like static before a storm. Drake sat comfortably in his chair, legs crossed, hands folded, dressed calm, expensive, and unbothered on the surface. The cameras loved him. They always did. The crowd had applauded louder than usual when he walked out. A few gasps. A few whispers. Phones itching in pockets backstage. Across the table, Sunny Hostin adjusted her notes. She'd done this thousands of times. Politicians, actors, CEOs. She had a reputation. Sharp questions, moral framing, no wasted words. This wasn't supposed to be different. Just another segment on The View. Another celebrity. Another conversation. But Drake's eyes told a different story. He smiled, nodded along as the first few minutes passed. Music. Success. Congratulations on the tour. Polite laughter. Safe ground. The kind of opening that lowers your guard just enough. Then Sunny leaned in slightly. "So, Drake," she said, voice smooth but deliberate, "you've spoken a lot about growth and maturity in your recent work. But critics say your influence doesn't always match that message, especially when it comes to how young audiences absorb what you say about relationships, women, and power." The word critics landed hard. Drake's smile stayed. But it changed. The corners didn't lift as high. His jaw tightened, just a fraction. He glanced toward the audience, then back at Sunny. "I think that's an interesting way to frame it," he replied calmly. Too calmly. Sunny didn't blink. "Is it fair, though? When someone with your platform sends mixed messages, don't you have a responsibility to address that?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. This wasn't a soft pitch. This was a fastball. Drake leaned back, inhaled, exhaled slowly. Inside, something old stirred. Years of headlines. Think pieces. Quotes taken out of context. Being spoken about instead of to. He'd learned to ignore most of it. But this was live. Unfiltered. And it wasn't just about his music. It was about his character. "I don't think responsibility means silence," he said. "But I also don't think it means letting people define you with labels that ignore context." Sunny nodded, but pressed forward. "Context matters, yes, but accountability matters too. And some would say you've avoided that conversation." That's when it happened. Drake leaned forward. No smile now. His voice stayed even, but it carried weight. "Sunny," he said, "can I ask you something real quick?" The room went still. She paused. "Of course." "When you say, some would say, who exactly are we talking about?" he asked. "Because I'm sitting here, live, and I want to know who I'm answering to." A beat. Then another. Sunny glanced down at her notes. The audience shifted in their seats. One woman in the front row covered her mouth, sensing something unfolding. "Well," Sunny said carefully, "journalists, cultural commentators, that don't live my life." Drake cut in, still calm but firmer now. "That don't sit in the rooms I sit in. That don't talk to the people I talk to. Yet somehow, I'm expected to answer for their interpretations." The applause started before anyone realized it. Sunny raised her hand slightly, signaling for calm. "I'm not accusing you, Drake. I'm asking you to reflect." "And I am reflecting," he replied, eyes locked on hers. "But reflection goes both ways. You're asking me to own my influence. Are we also talking about how media shapes narratives around artists like me?" The word like hung there. Loaded. Sunny's expression shifted. Just a touch. "Are you suggesting bias?" "I'm suggesting patterns," Drake said. "And I think we both know what those patterns look like." The studio went quiet. No clapping now. Just breath. Somewhere off camera, a producer whispered urgently. This was not in the rundown. Sunny straightened in her chair. If you're implying something, say it clearly. Drake didn't hesitate. I'm saying that when I make a song, it's called problematic. When someone else does it, it's called art. And I'm tired of pretending I don't notice.
Gasps.
A sharp intake of breath from the audience. Social media managers backstage were already typing. Sunny's voice hardened slightly. So you're saying criticism of you is unfair? I'm saying it's selective, he replied. And today, I'm not dodging it. The tension was no longer subtle. It was thick, visible, alive. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was a line being drawn. Right there, live on air. And everyone in the room knew this was only the beginning. The silence after Drake's last sentence wasn't empty. It was loaded. The kind that presses against your ears and makes you hyper-aware of every movement, every breath. A camera operator shifted his stance. Someone in the audience let out a nervous laugh that died instantly. The red live light above the main camera glowed brighter than ever, as if reminding everyone, there was no cutting away from this. Sunny Hostin held Drake's gaze. Years of courtroom discipline showed in her posture. Straight back, chin level, eyes steady. She had been challenged before, but rarely like this. Not this directly. Not with this many people watching. Selective criticism is a serious accusation, Sunny Hostin said, her voice controlled but edged. And with seriousness comes evidence. Are you saying that your work is judged by a different standard? Drake nodded once. Slowly. Deliberately. I'm saying that when my words are dissected, Drake replied, they're stripped of tone, stripped of story, stripped of the reality they come from. And then I'm asked to apologize for something I didn't even say the way it's being presented. A ripple of applause rose again. Louder this time. Sunny lifted her hand, but it didn't fully quiet the room. The audience wasn't picking sides yet, but they were leaning in. She turned slightly toward him. But Drake, influence doesn't live in intention alone. It lives in impact. You're not just a storyteller, you're a role model, whether you want that title or not. Drake exhaled through his nose. A half smile flickered, then disappeared. That's the part that always gets me, he said. The idea that I'm responsible for how everyone chooses to interpret art, but somehow not allowed to explain myself without being told I'm defensive. One of the co-hosts shifted uncomfortably. Another stared straight ahead, hands folded, saying nothing. This wasn't their moment anymore. Sunny leaned forward. Explaining is different from deflecting. Drake leaned forward too. Same distance. Same intensity. And questioning the question isn't deflecting, he shot back. It's engaging. The crowd reacted audibly now, soft ohs. A few claps quickly hushed. The energy in the studio was tilting, swaying like a scale, unsure where to land. Sunny paused, then asked, do you believe there's any validity to the criticism you receive? Drake didn't answer immediately. He looked down at his hands, clasped together, then back up. For a split second, the armor cracked, just enough to show something real underneath. I believe I'm human, he said. I believe I've made mistakes. But I also believe that my growth is constantly ignored because it doesn't fit the headline. A producer's voice crackled faintly through an earpiece somewhere off stage. This segment was running long. No one moved to stop it. Sunny softened her tone, but not her stance. Growth requires accountability, and accountability often requires discomfort. Drake nodded. I agree. The audience stilled again. But discomfort shouldn't be one-sided, he continued. If I'm expected to sit here and answer for every lyric, every rumor, every interpretation, then the people asking those questions should also be willing to examine why they're asking them. Sunny's eyes narrowed slightly. And why do you think I'm asking? Drake didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Because controversy sells, he said. Because tension brings clicks. And because holding me to a moral standard makes for good TV, even if the conversation skips nuance. That landed hard. A collective intake of breath. Somewhere in the audience, someone whispered, wow. Sunny straightened fully now. Are you accusing this show of exploiting you? I'm saying the system rewards confrontation, Drake replied. And today, I decided not to play quiet. The words play quiet echoed. They weren't angry. They were resolved. Sunny let a beat pass, then another. She turned briefly toward the camera, then back to Drake. Then let's be clear, she said. This platform also gives you the opportunity to speak directly to millions.
Right now.
Unfiltered. Isn't that power too? Drake smiled faintly. It is. And that's why I'm using it. Applause broke out. Stronger, less restrained. Some audience members stood halfway out of their seats before sitting back down. The control room was probably in chaos. Sunny waited for the noise to settle. So, what do you want people watching at home to understand? Drake didn't hesitate. I want them to understand that artists aren't villains or saints, he said. We're mirrors. And sometimes people don't like what they see reflected back. The room went quiet again, but this time it felt different. Less tense. More contemplative. Sunny nodded slowly. That's a powerful statement.
Thank you, Drake replied.
I mean it. For a moment, it seemed like the storm might pass. Like the conversation might gently pivot, cool down, find neutral ground. Then Sunny added, almost casually, but mirrors don't choose what they reflect. People do. Drake's eyes sharpened. And just like that, the calm fractured again. The audience sensed it instantly. This wasn't over. Not even close. Drake didn't respond right away. Sunny's last line, people do, hung between them like a challenge disguised as philosophy. The audience shifted again, sensing the temperature rise. This wasn't combative shouting. This was sharper, cleaner. Two people circling the same truth from opposite sides, neither willing to blink. Drake finally smiled, but this time it wasn't warmth. It was recognition. That's exactly my point, Drake said quietly. People choose what they want to see. And when they've already decided who you are, everything you do just becomes evidence. Sunny Hostin's lips pressed together for a brief second. She had heard politicians dodge with prettier words. She wasn't going to let this turn into a monologue. But choice doesn't erase consequence, Sunny Hostin replied. When your work reaches millions, the impact is real, regardless of interpretation. Drake nodded slowly. Then let's talk about impact honestly. The audience leaned forward as one body. Let's talk about why certain lyrics are called harmful, he continued, while the same themes, coming from different voices, are called honest or raw. Let's talk about why growth arcs are celebrated for some artists and questioned for others. Sunny raised an eyebrow. Are you saying this is about race? The word landed like a dropped glass. A few gasps. A few heads snapped toward the stage. Somewhere backstage, someone muttered, "Oh no." Drake didn't flinch. I'm saying it's part of the conversation, he answered. Not the whole thing, but pretending it's irrelevant is dishonest. The studio was dead silent now. Even the clapping reflex had disappeared. Sunny inhaled, steadying herself. That's a serious claim to make on live television. So is telling me I'm responsible for everyone's interpretation of my art, Drake replied, voice still even. But here we are. One of the co-hosts shifted, clearly wanting to step in, then stopped. This was no longer something you could moderate without breaking it. Sunny folded her hands on the table. Let me ask you this directly, she said. Do you feel misunderstood or unfairly targeted? Drake looked out toward the audience instead of answering immediately. Faces stared back at him. Young, old, excited, uncomfortable. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing into his chest. Both, he said finally. And being misunderstood is one thing. But being reduced, that's harder to accept. A murmur rolled through the crowd. Sunny nodded once. Reduced how? To a headline, Drake said. To a clip. To a controversy that outlives the truth. I can release 10 songs about healing, about reflection, but one line gets pulled, and suddenly, that's who I am again. Sunny responded quickly. But doesn't that come with the territory of fame? Drake turned back to her. Fame shouldn't cancel fairness. That line hit. Applause broke out before Sunny could respond. This time it was louder, more decisive. A few people actually stood. The energy had shifted, no longer just tension but alignment. Or, at least engagement. Sunny waited it out, then raised her voice just enough to cut through. Fairness goes both ways, she said. Public figures benefit enormously from attention. Criticism is part of that exchange. Drake nodded. I agree. But criticism should be about what's actually there, not what's convenient. The two locked eyes again. Neither angry, neither smiling, just honest. Sunny softened her tone, but not her intent. So, what would accountability look like to you? Drake paused. This time, the pause felt intentional, not defensive, not calculated. It would look like conversation, he said. Not judgment disguised as concern. It would look like asking questions without already deciding the answer. Sunny leaned back slightly. And, you feel that hasn't happened? I feel, Drake said carefully, that when I sit across from people like you, I'm often asked to confess instead of explain. The audience reacted instantly, half applause, half sharp inhales. Sunny tilted her head. Confession implies guilt. I haven't accused you of that. But the framing does, Drake replied. And framing matters. Another co-host finally interjected softly, trying to redirect. I think what Sunny is saying is. Drake raised a hand, not rudely, just enough to pause her. With respect, I want to finish this thought. The studio producer's voice crackled louder now. Time warnings. They were bleeding into the next segment. No one cared. Sunny allowed it. I'm not here to fight, Drake continued. I'm here because I'm tired of being spoken about like I'm not in the room. Today, I am. So, I'm speaking. A hush fell again, different from before. This one felt heavy with something like respect. Sunny studied him for a moment, then said, You're right about one thing. Drake's eyebrows lifted slightly. Conversation does require openness, she admitted. And I'll concede that media doesn't always get it right. The audience murmured, surprised. But, Sunny added, openness also means listening when people tell you they're hurt by what they hear. Drake nodded once. And I do listen. More than people think. A beat passed. Sunny looked toward the camera, then back at Drake. Then maybe the real issue isn't whether criticism exists, but whether it's allowed to evolve. Drake smiled faintly. Exactly. For the first time since the tension began, the air seemed to loosen. Applause filled the room, measured, thoughtful, sincere. But just as it seemed the confrontation might resolve into mutual understanding, Sunny glanced down at her notes one last time. There is one more thing people keep asking, she said. Drake's smile faded. And I think it's important, she continued, that we address it right now. The audience held its breath. Whatever was coming next, everyone knew it would change the tone of the conversation completely. Drake didn't interrupt. He didn't lean back or cross his arms. He stayed still, eyes fixed on Sunny, as if bracing for impact. The audience felt it too, that collective sense that the conversation had reached the edge of something dangerous, something irreversible. Sunny Hostin lifted her notes, then slowly set them down again, choosing her words with care. People want to know, Sunny Hostin said, whether your recent silence on certain social issues is intentional or avoidance. A sharp reaction cut through the studio. A few audible ohs. Someone in the back whispered, Here it is. Drake blinked once. Silence stretched. This wasn't about music anymore. This wasn't about lyrics or headlines. This was about morality. About expectation. About the invisible contract the world signs for you when you become famous. Drake exhaled slowly, then leaned forward just enough for the cameras to catch the shift. See, Drake said. This is exactly what I mean. Sunny didn't look away. Then explain it. He nodded. People assume silence equals guilt. Or indifference.
Or fear.
But sometimes silence is restraint. A man in the audience shook his head slightly, conflicted. A woman beside him nodded in agreement. The room was split, not loudly but deeply. Drake continued, voice steady. Every time I speak on something, it becomes the thing. Not the issue itself, but my position, my tone, my phrasing. Suddenly, the conversation isn't about what's happening in the world. It's about whether I said it the right way. Sunny responded immediately. But with your influence, doesn't choosing silence still send a message? Drake met her gaze. It does. Just not the one people project onto it. He paused, letting that sink in. I've seen what happens when celebrities rush to comment, he went on. They're praised for 24 hours, then punished for a sentence that didn't land right. I decided I won't turn serious issues into performative moments. The word performative rippled through the crowd. Sunny folded her arms lightly. Some would argue that speaking up, even imperfectly, is better than not speaking at all. And some would argue, Drake replied, that turning real pain into a soundbite does more harm than good. Applause erupted, loud, divided, emotional. A few people clapped hard. Others stayed silent, arms crossed. The control room was almost certainly panicking now. Sunny waited for the noise to fade. So you don't believe public figures have a duty to speak? I believe they have a duty to be honest, Drake said. And honesty sometimes means saying, I don't have enough to add without making it about me. That landed differently. Not explosive. Heavy. Sunny's expression softened just a fraction. But when people look to you, especially young people, they're not just listening for answers. They're looking for solidarity. Drake nodded. And I show that in ways that don't always trend. In rooms without cameras. In conversations that don't go viral. The audience quieted. This wasn't a clap line. This was a confession. Sunny studied him, then asked gently, Do you think people would believe that? Drake's voice dropped slightly. I think belief is optional. Truth isn't. A hush fell over the studio. Even the air felt still. One of the co-hosts shifted, clearly emotional. Another glanced toward the floor. This was no longer a debate. It was a reckoning unfolding live. Sunny took a breath. I appreciate that answer, she said. Truly. Drake nodded once. Thank you. For a brief moment, it felt like closure, like the tension had finally found its release. Then Sunny added, almost reluctantly, but you have to understand why people question you. Drake's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in resolve. I do, he said. I just don't accept being questioned like I'm on trial. The audience reacted instantly, strong applause, louder than before, rolling through the studio like a wave. Someone shouted, Tell them. Sunny didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply nodded, acknowledging the moment for what it was. This has been, she said carefully, an intense conversation. Drake allowed himself a small smile. Necessary ones usually are. The red live light was still on, and everyone watching, from the studio seats to living rooms across the country, knew the fallout wouldn't wait until tomorrow. It had already begun. The moment the cameras finally cut to commercial, the room didn't relax, it exhaled. Applause broke out, louder and more chaotic than anything heard during the segment. Some people stood fully now. Others stayed seated, stunned, staring at the table where it had all unfolded. Drake pushed his chair back slightly, rolled his shoulders once, as if releasing tension he'd been holding for years. Sunny Hostin removed her glasses, rubbed the bridge of her nose, then looked back up at him. Not defeated, not triumphant, just thoughtful. But the real explosion didn't happen in the studio. It happened everywhere else. Phones lit up across the audience. Producers backstage stared at monitors as clips began spreading in real time. Group chats ignited. Social feeds refreshed faster than anyone could track. Within minutes, short videos titled Drake Snaps Live and Sunny Hostin vs. Drake, uncut, began climbing. Back on set, a producer leaned in and whispered something to Sunny. She nodded slowly. Drake caught the movement, smiled faintly, already knowing. This wasn't going to stay contained. When the show returned, the tone was different. Calmer, polite, almost surreal. But everyone watching could feel the aftershock humming underneath every word. The earlier conversation had shifted something, not just between two people, but in the room and far beyond it. Later that evening, headlines rolled in waves. Some praised Drake for finally speaking with clarity and restraint. Measured.
Honest.
Unflinching. Others accused him of deflection, of intellectualizing responsibility, of sidestepping accountability with eloquence. Clips were slowed down, analyzed frame by frame. His pauses became think pieces. His tone became a debate. Sunny wasn't spared either. Supporters of Sunny Hostin applauded her for pressing forward, for asking the questions many felt needed to be asked. Critics accused her of framing, of pushing, of turning conversation into confrontation. Hashtags split into camps. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds. And right at the center of it all sat one phrase, echoing louder than any argument. Fame shouldn't cancel fairness. By midnight, the segment from The View was trending across platforms. Musicians weighed in. Journalists wrote op-eds before dawn. Fans shared personal stories, how Drake's music helped them through heartbreak, how his words mattered, how the conversation felt bigger than one man on one couch. Even those who disagreed admitted one thing. It felt real.
Drake didn't tweet that night.
No statement. No clarification. Just silence. Intentional. Controlled. The same restraint he'd spoken about on air. Sunny, meanwhile, posted a single line. Hard conversations are necessary. Nothing more. The next morning, reaction videos flooded in. Some hosts praised Drake's composure. Others said Sunny held her ground with integrity. Many said the moment revealed more about media, expectation, and power than either side intended. But maybe that was the point. In the days that followed, something subtle happened. Interviews began sounding different. Questions were framed more carefully. Artists pushed back more openly. Viewers listened more closely, not just to answers, but to the way questions were asked. That live moment didn't end when the cameras shut off. It lingered. And now it lingers with you. So, what do you think happened when Drake finally fired back, live, unfiltered, with nowhere to hide? Was it honesty? Deflection? Growth? Or something messier and more human? Drop your opinion in the comments. I want to read every perspective. And if you felt the tension, the emotion, the truth crackling through that moment, subscribe to Live Narratives right now. Share this story, like the video, and stay with us for more explosive, cinematic moments where silence breaks and the real story finally gets told.